What if the kindness you're so proud of is actually a slow-acting poison? We've all been told that giving is a virtue, but for one man, it became his silent executioner. Stay with me, because the ending of this story will force you to question everything you thought you knew about being a good person. Imagine standing in a crowded room, shouting for help, only to realize that your voice has vanished because you gave all your breath away to inflate everyone else's balloons. This is the silent, suffocating reality of the giver's trap. We are taught from childhood that sacrifice is the ultimate virtue, but no one warns us about the moment the hero finally breaks. We celebrate the person who always says yes, the one who carries the village on their back, but we never look closely at the cracks in their foundation until the entire house collapses. Tonight, we aren't just telling a story. We are performing an autopsy on a soul that bled out while trying to heal others. Welcome to Water Concept Mindset, where we dive deep into the truths that stay hidden beneath the surface. If you've ever felt like a ghost in your own life, invisible to the very people you've saved 1,000 times, then you cannot afford to turn away now. This is the story of Arif, a man whose kindness became his own executioner, and the chilling lesson he learned when he finally hit the floor. Before we uncover the dark side of being the heart of the village, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Your support is the fuel that allows us to continue exploring these profound human journeys and bringing light to the corners of the mind that often go neglected. Arif was a man defined by a beautiful, tragic paradox. In a small village cradled by green fields and ancient trees, he was the living pulse of the community. To the neighbors, he was a saint. To the widow Amina, he was a son. To the children, he was a titan of strength. But to himself, Arif had become a stranger. He lived in a house at the edge of the woods that was slowly being reclaimed by the earth. While he spent his daylight hours repairing the fences of his neighbors and his sunset hours finding lost livestock, his own roof bowed under the weight of neglect. The walls of his home were webbed with cracks, mimicking the exhaustion etched into his very bones. He was the world's most reliable man, yet he was the most unreliable person to himself. We often think that by pouring every drop of our spirit into others, we are becoming full, but Arif's life proves that you can be surrounded by a village of people and still be starving for a single ounce of self-preservation. He was a candle burning from both ends, lighting the way for everyone else while his own center was turning to ash. This is where the architecture of neglect begins, not with a sudden crash, but with the quiet, repeated whisper of "I'll take care of myself tomorrow." But as Arif was about to find out, tomorrow is a debt that eventually comes due, and the interest is paid in pain. While the world outside saw a saint, the quiet reality within Arif's own walls was a slow-motion disaster, a testament to what happens when we prioritize the applause of others over the whispers of our own needs. This was the architecture of neglect, a deliberate, daily choice to bury his own exhaustion under the weight of his neighbor's burdens. Every morning, before the dew had even evaporated from the grass, Arif's routine was a masterclass in self-erasure. He didn't begin his day with a moment of stillness or a meal to nourish his strength. Instead, he began by tallying the debts of kindness he felt he owed the world. He carried heavy buckets of water for the widow Amina, his joints protesting with every step, and spent his midday heat mending fences for men who were far healthier than he was. As I look at his life, I see a man addicted to being needed, a man who mistook his own depletion for a higher calling. The most haunting symbol of this neglect was Arif's own home. In the language of storytelling, a house is often a mirror of the soul, and Arif's house was screaming. The roof bowed like a tired back, the walls were webbed with cracks that let in the biting night air, and the floor was thick with the dust of 1,000 forgotten chores. Every evening, he would return home, see the ruins of his own sanctuary, and breathe that poisonous lie we all tell ourselves: "I'll fix it tomorrow." But for Arif, tomorrow was a mirage that retreated every time he took a step toward it. He was caught in a psychological loop where his identity was entirely dependent on external validation. If he wasn't helping, who was he? If he wasn't the heart of the village, was he even alive? This tomorrow trap is a dangerous form of procrastination, where we treat our own well-being as a luxury we haven't earned. Arif believed that by fixing everyone else's world, he was somehow earning the right to eventually fix his own. But the tragedy of the givers is that they often give away the very tools they need to survive. He was painting everyone else's masterpiece, while his own canvas sat rotting in the rain, proving that you can be the most loved person in a village and still be a stranger to the person staring back at you in the mirror. The terrifying thing about a crumbling foundation is that it doesn't always collapse during a storm. Sometimes it gives way under the weight of a single, final feather. For Arif, that feather arrived in the form of a panicked cry for help when a young boy came running to report that an ox had fallen into a pit. Arif's body was already screaming for rest, his vision blurring at the edges of his consciousness. Yet, the habit of self-betrayal was so deeply ingrained that he didn't even pause to breathe. He ran. He pushed his muscles past the point of failure, straining against the earth and the weight of the beast until the animal was saved. The villagers cheered, their voices a warm canopy of praise that usually sustained him. But as he turned to walk home, the canopy vanished, leaving him in a cold, staggering reality. He reached his own threshold, the very door he had neglected for years, and the world simply went black. What followed was a silence so profound it felt heavy. For 2 agonizing days, Arif lay on his dusty floor, drifting between feverish dreams and a hollow wakefulness. This is the part of the story that breaks my heart, because it reveals the dark side of being too reliable. As he lay there, listening to the muffled sounds of village life through the cracks in his walls, he waited for the widow Amina to wonder why her water hadn't arrived. He waited for the neighbors whose fences he had mended to notice his absence. But the knock never came. The silence wasn't born of cruelty, but of a devastating assumption. Everyone believed Arif was invincible because he was always the one saving others. No one could imagine him needing to be saved. He was the victim of the bystander effect, mixed with his own legend. As the sun set on the second day, a bitter, icy realization began to thaw his heart. He looked up at his leaking roof and whispered, "I gave my heart to everyone, but no one is here when I need them." The tears that rolled down his cheeks weren't just from physical pain. They were the tears of a man realizing he had spent his life building everyone else's home, while leaving himself a ghost in a ruin. This was his dark night of the soul, the moment he realized that his self-sacrifice hadn't bought him love. It had bought him invisibility. In that hollow chamber of disappointment, where his tears finally met the dust of his neglected floor, Arif reached the point where the ego of the martyr finally crumbled to make room for the wisdom of the man. On the third day, as the fever began to lift but his spirit remained heavy, a wandering monk appeared at his door, stepping into the ruin like a quiet light entering a dark room. The monk didn't come with a lecture or a miracle. He came with a cup of water and a silence that felt like a sanctuary. As he sat beside the pale, broken shell of the village hero, he asked a question that was deceptively simple. "Son, why are you here all alone?" Arif's answer was a whisper of profound exhaustion. He admitted that he had been too busy lighting everyone else's path to notice he was stumbling in the dark. The monk looked at him, not with pity, but with a deep, piercing clarity that demanded a change in perspective. "My child," he said softly, "you cannot light others' lamps if your own flame is gone." This wasn't just a catchy phrase. It was a fundamental law of existence that Arif had tried to break for years. We often romanticize the idea of giving until it hurts. But the monk was teaching a different truth. Giving from a place of depletion is not love. It is a desperate attempt to feel worthy. He introduced what I call the empty cup doctrine. Think about it. If you try to pour water for a thirsty traveler from a dry pitcher, you are only offering them the sound of hollow clay. You aren't helping them. You are both just standing in the sun. thirsty. The monk's philosophy challenged the very core of Arif's identity, forcing him to realize that self-care is not an act of selfishness, but an act of stewardship. You are the only vessel you have to do good in this world. If you allow that vessel to crack and leak, you eventually become a burden to the very people you intended to serve. As the monk spoke about the balance of the battery and the roots of the tree, Arif began to understand that his yes to the world was meaningless if he didn't have a yes for himself. He had to learn that his value wasn't tied to his utility, that he was worthy of care simply because he existed, not because of how many fences he mended. The monk's words acted like a slow-release medicine, seeping into the cracks of Arif's broken spirit until the realization finally took hold. His life was not a gift to others if it was a burden to himself. This internal shift marked the beginning of a new equilibrium, a transformation that wasn't about becoming cold, but about becoming whole. When Arif finally stood up on that fourth morning, the village expected the same man to return to the same old patterns. But they encountered someone they didn't recognize. For the first time, Arif's hands weren't reaching for a neighbor's plow. They were reaching for a broom to sweep his own dust. He spent his days mending his own roof and planting flowers by his own door, creating a sanctuary that reflected his newfound self-respect. As I observe this change in him, I see the most difficult part of the healing journey: the courage to say no. When the villagers came with their usual demands, Arif didn't offer a hollow excuse. He offered a boundary. He would smile and say, "I must finish my own work first, then I will come." At first, the air in the village grew thick with judgment. People whispered that he had become selfish, confused by a man who no longer allowed himself to be consumed. But as the weeks passed, something miraculous happened. Because Arif was no longer running on empty, the help he did give was infused with a new kind of presence and joy. He was no longer a ghost performing a duty. He was a man sharing his abundance. The village itself began to breathe differently. By watching Arif, they learned that a community is only as strong as the hearts within it. They realized that, when you love yourself, your love for others becomes pure and full, rather than a desperate attempt to be needed. As we close this chapter, I want you to look at the sunset, just as Arif did by the river. Remember that loving yourself isn't a detour from being a good person. It is the very foundation of it. Take the time to rest, to heal, and to refill your cup. If this journey through Arif's soul touched yours, please share this video with someone who gives too much, and stay with Water Concept Mindset. The world doesn't need your pain. It needs your light, and that light can only shine if you choose to keep your own flame alive. Arif's story is not just about kindness. It's about the quiet danger of losing yourself in the act of being needed. For years, he believed that self-sacrifice was proof of love. He thought that the more he gave, the more valuable he became. But in reality, every yes to the world was a silent no to himself. His collapse wasn't caused by a single dramatic event. It was the result of countless small betrayals, postponed rest, ignored exhaustion, and the lie of, "I'll take care of myself tomorrow." When no one came to save him, he was forced to confront a painful truth. Being indispensable to others does not make you invincible. It can make you invisible. The monk's wisdom revealed something powerful. Real generosity doesn't come from depletion. It comes from wholeness. When Arif began tending to his own roof before repairing others, he didn't become selfish. He became sustainable. And from that place of strength, his kindness finally had roots. The deeper lesson: you cannot pour from an empty cup. Self-care is not selfish. It is responsibility. How to apply this today? Start small. Set one boundary this week. Rest without guilt. Finish one task for yourself before helping someone else. Protect your energy like it matters, because it does. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt drained from giving too much to others? Please share your thoughts in the comments so we can learn from each other. And if this message resonated with you, Please subscribe to support the channel and help us continue creating meaningful content for you.